History remembers her as a seductress. But what if Cleopatra was actually the smartest ruler the ancient world had ever seen? The night was silent over the city of Alexandria. Golden torchlight flickered against massive marble walls. The Mediterranean wind moved softly through the palace curtains. Somewhere in the darkness, soldiers whispered about war, betrayal, death. And inside the royal palace, a young queen prepared for the most dangerous gamble of her life. Her name was Cleopatra, a woman history would blame for the fall of men. But the truth, she was fighting to save her kingdom from destruction. And before her story ended, two of the most powerful men in human history would risk everything for her, including Rome itself. Cleopatra was born in 69 BC into the powerful Ptolemaic dynasty of Egypt. But despite ruling Egypt, her family wasn't actually Egyptian. They were Greek. For nearly 300 years, the descendants of Alexander the Great had ruled Egypt like foreign kings. Most of them were cruel, paranoid, and obsessed with power. Brothers married sisters, family members poisoned each other, assassinations were normal inside the palace, and Cleopatra grew up surrounded by all of it. From childhood, she learned one brutal lesson. In royal bloodlines, love meant nothing. Only power mattered. But Cleopatra was different from the rulers before her. She was highly educated, intelligent, and unbelievably charismatic. She studied mathematics, astronomy, politics, philosophy, and warfare. She could speak multiple languages fluently, something almost no ruler of her time could do. People didn't just listen to Cleopatra, they believed her, and that made her dangerous. When Cleopatra was only 18 years old, her father died. According to Egyptian tradition, she was forced to marry her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, and rule beside him. But the partnership quickly turned into a nightmare. Ptolemy's advisors hated Cleopatra. They feared her intelligence and influence. Slowly, they began turning the young king against her. Soon, the palace became a battlefield, not with swords, but with spies, manipulation, and betrayal. Then, one day, Cleopatra disappeared. She was forced to flee Egypt for her own survival. Most people thought her story was over, but Cleopatra wasn't planning to run. She was planning a comeback, and she knew exactly who could help her reclaim the throne: Julius Caesar. At that time, Caesar was already becoming the most powerful man in Rome, a brilliant general, a feared politician, a man who crushed anyone standing in his way. When Caesar arrived in Alexandria in 48 BC, Egypt was already drowning in chaos. Ptolemy wanted Caesar on his side, but Cleopatra had her own plan, and it would become one of the most legendary moments in history. According to ancient stories, Cleopatra secretly entered Caesar's palace, hidden inside a rolled-up carpet. Imagine the scene: Roman guards standing outside, the carpet being carried into Caesar's chambers, the room quiet. Then, suddenly, the carpet unrolled and out stepped Cleopatra herself, young, confident, fearless. Caesar was stunned, not just by her beauty, but by her presence. Cleopatra spoke like a queen who already knew she would win. That night changed history forever. Caesar chose Cleopatra over her brother, and instantly Egypt exploded into civil war. The streets of Alexandria filled with violence. Fires burned through parts of the city. Roman soldiers fought Egyptian forces in brutal battles. At one point, the famous Library of Alexandria may have partially burned during the conflict, but in the end, Caesar's army won. Ptolemy XIII tried escaping across the Nile River, but his boat capsized. He drowned before reaching shore. And just like that, Cleopatra became Queen of Egypt again. But victory came with a price. Rome now had enormous influence over Egypt, and Cleopatra's relationship with Caesar became one of the most talked about scandals in the ancient world. Soon, Cleopatra gave birth to a son called Caesarion. She claimed Caesar was the father. That single child terrified Rome. Because if Caesar officially recognized him, Caesarion could become heir to both Egypt and Rome itself. The political tension became explosive. Still, Cleopatra traveled to Rome and lived there openly as Caesar's companion. Many Romans hated her. To them, she was a foreign queen manipulating their leader. Rumors spread everywhere. Some called her a genius, others called her a witch. But Cleopatra understood something most people didn't. Rome was not stable. It was cracking from within. And then came the day that changed everything. March 15th, 44 BC, the Ides of March. Caesar entered the Roman Senate surrounded by politicians pretending to be loyal. Moments later, they attacked. Knives flashed through the chamber. Caesar was stabbed again and again and again. By the time it ended, Rome's greatest leader lay dead in a pool of blood. Cleopatra's protector was gone, and suddenly she was alone again. Fearing for her life and her son's future, Cleopatra fled Rome immediately and returned to Egypt. But Rome was descending into chaos. A massive power struggle began between Caesar's supporters and his assassins. And in the middle of it all emerged a new man, Mark Antony. A legendary Roman general, brilliant in battle, wild, emotional, fearless. And, unlike Caesar, Antony was driven more by passion than control. When Antony summoned Cleopatra to meet him in 41 BC, many believed he intended to interrogate her. Instead, history repeated itself. Cleopatra arrived on a magnificent golden ship dressed like the goddess Aphrodite herself. Purple sails moved across the water. Musicians played as perfume filled the air. It wasn't just an entrance, it was psychological warfare. Antony was captivated instantly. But their relationship became far more than romance. Together, Antony and Cleopatra became one of the most powerful couples in the ancient world. They threw extravagant celebrations, built alliances, raised armies, and slowly Rome began to panic because Antony was changing. Roman leaders feared Cleopatra's influence over him. They believed she was convincing Antony to betray Rome itself. One man used that fear better than anyone else, Octavian, the adopted son of Julius Caesar. Cold, patient, extremely intelligent. Octavian understood something important. If he could turn Rome against Cleopatra, he could destroy Antony too. So he launched a propaganda war nothing like Rome had ever seen. He painted Cleopatra as a dangerous seductress, corrupting Roman values. He claimed Antony had become her puppet, and the Roman people believed it. Soon, war became inevitable. In 31 BC, the final confrontation arrived, the Battle of Actium. Hundreds of ships collided across the sea. Fire arrows lit the sky. Soldiers screamed as ships crashed into one another. This wasn't just a battle, it was a fight for control of the entire Mediterranean world. Then something unexpected happened. Cleopatra's fleet suddenly retreated. Seeing her leave, Antony made a shocking decision. Instead of continuing the battle, he followed her. And just like that, the war was lost. Octavian became unstoppable. As his armies marched towards Egypt, Antony and Cleopatra realized the end was near. Their empire was collapsing, their allies disappeared, their future was gone. Then came the tragedy. A false rumor spread that Cleopatra had died. When Antony heard it, he was devastated. Believing he had lost everything, he took his own sword and stabbed himself. But he didn't die immediately. Bleeding heavily, Antony learned Cleopatra was still alive. His dying body was carried to her tomb, and there, in Cleopatra's arms, Mark Antony finally died. The woman blamed for destroying powerful men had just watched the man she loved die beside her. But Cleopatra still faced one final enemy,
Octavian entered Alexandria victorious. He planned to capture Cleopatra alive and parade her through Rome as a trophy. For Cleopatra, that fate was worse than death. She had lived as a queen. She would not die as a prisoner. And so, in August of 30 BC, Cleopatra made her final decision. Ancient stories say she allowed a venomous asp snake to bite her. Others believe poison was secretly delivered another way. No one knows the exact truth. But when Octavian's men entered the room, Cleopatra was dead. She was only 39 years old. With her death, the age of ancient Egypt came to an end. Egypt became part of the Roman Empire, and Octavian would soon become Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. But Cleopatra's story refused to die. For over 2,000 years, the world